Welcome to Blue Monday, an Ipswich Town podcast, where during the international break, we have a special pod with the author of a new George Burley book relating specifically to his managerial stint at Ipswich Town. Welcome to the pod, Neil Prentice. Hello, Neil.
Hi, Craig. How you doing?
Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. As I say, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the book that you spent an awful lot of time putting together. Give you a chance to sell it to people. I had the privilege of interviewing George 2 or 3 years ago now for the pod, and we did an hour on his playing career and an hour on his Ipswich managerial career. And it's only really once you take a step back and take a breath, you realise what a career George had at Ipswich, and you can then start having that pub conversation about where he sits in the pantheon of legends, given his career sort of straddles generations, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah, I think he's without doubt one of the most influential characters in the club's history.
Yeah, influential is a very good term to use. So, just for everyone's benefit, including my own, before we talk about the book itself, what's your background? What are your credentials? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I suppose I'd tell myself an Ipswich Town aficionado, really. Absolutely love the club. Have done since the day I was born. Had no option but to support Ipswich Town with a dad who's an absolute fanatic. He actually appeared on the 1978 FA Cup final mastermind when Ipswich beat Arsenal. So,
oh wow,
that was a bit. That's always his claim to fame, and he actually managed to win it. But nobody saw it because they were all at the match. So, and they didn't have videos in those days, did they?
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, fantastic little bit of trivia there. We'll talk about, the book itself, and you're very keen to let us know about the photos that are included in the book. But I'm just going to get up a little photo that you've sent through us, just as a bit of evidence of your elongated Ipswich Town career. Although obviously this is back to 2000 or thereabouts. But you were telling me earlier that your Ipswich Town following career starts a little bit sooner than the picture of Marcus Stewart we've got up there.
Yeah, I started following Ipswich in 1985. The first match I went to was a FA Cup tie with Gillingham, which we managed to win 3-2. Kevin Wilson's debut.
Yes.
Popular player back in the day, wasn't he? George actually played in that game, but he left the club soon afterwards. Pretty much after going that first time, I never really missed a home game at Portman Road. Then in the mid-90s, I actually got involved with the club professionally. I worked for a marketing agency, and we used to produce a lot of the club's marketing literature. So by the time Marcus Stewart joined the club in 2000, we were doing a lot of material for the club, brochures, magazines, the retail catalogues, the season ticket mailers, all of that sort of design work. So I had a little bit of an inside track. I wouldn't say I knew players personally or anything like that, but I was down at the club on a really regular basis, working with people very closely down there. And it was an incredible time to be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So, you've been a supporter of the club and in and around the club for a lot of time, for a long time. Now, forgive me, I've never written the story of a professional football manager. What's the actual process involved with it? Let's start off with, how do you actually initiate the whole project? Does George come to you? Do you approach him? How does that all start?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, really. I think I'd always had the idea for the book dating back to that time when I used to work, alongside people at the club. Fanatical fan, and really enjoyed the professional side as well. But I even felt at that time that there was a really interesting story, a really interesting football story that would one day be told. So I remembered everything. I kept everything. So you could say that the book was 25 years in the making, really. And then earlier this year, I met up with a good friend of mine called Mike Noy, who was working at the club at that period. He worked at the club for 19 years, actually, in a number of different roles. Mike is one of those people that's known and trusted by everybody. So we had lunch, and he said, "Oh, what are you doing at the moment?" I said, "Well, I've got this idea about writing a book about George's time as manager, the full 8 years, not just the Wembley victory or the 5th place finish, but the whole period." And Mike got very excited about it. He's retired now, and he said, "Well, I'll see if George wants to be involved. I'll give him a ring." So I literally got back to my desk. And by the time I got back to my desk, Mike had been in touch again to say, "I've spoken to George. We're meeting him next Tuesday." So really, I thought, right, okay, well, I've said it now. I've got to get on with it and see what we can do. So we met George, got on really well with him. He was very enthusiastic. I showed him the 1980-81 book that I've been involved with before, that I put together. He obviously knew about that because he featured in it. And he liked the thought of doing something which was not your stereotypical autobiography. Yeah,
brilliant. And having been to one of the like evenings with George Burley, I know that he's a fantastic talker. Once you can sort of get your head around his accent, he's just a fantastic storyteller, isn't he? So how many like meetings do you have with it? What are the nuts and bolts of putting together a book like this? How many meetings do you have, and how long does it take from start to finish to get as much information as you need?
Well, as I said, I think I had a lot of background knowledge. So I've done some research, obviously, but a lot of it was there in my head. But we met quite regularly. I think we had 5 3-hour sessions in terms of doing the main interview. So there's about 40 pages of interview with George, about 20,000 words. George has also given his thoughts on all of the players as well. So we've got those comments. He's picked his dream team from the 101 players who represented the club in his time as manager. He's written other comments about other different articles that appear within the book, like about the commercial section or the media at the time, the stadium, all sorts of different. We've tried to explore every avenue about the club during those 8 years, and it very, very much is focused on that moment in time. So yeah, we spent probably about 15 hours together doing all of that, and then we have sort of relatively regular meetings now, just for me to show him what we're doing, show him what the pages look like. He's really interested in the process. He's taken a lot of pride in it, sort of as you would imagine him to, really, because George is, he is a perfectionist. He's a perfectionist as a manager, and he wants this to be really good, and it's really important to him as well that he wants the fans to get something which is a really good quality product.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, actually, you saying that reminded me of when I spoke to him for the pod. Is obviously we exchanged a couple of messages beforehand, but he was very keen after the event just to get in touch to find out how well it had been received or not, as the case may be. But no, he was very keen just to make sure that what he'd managed, or the chat we'd had managed to come across as well as he wanted. So that's good to hear. Now, you say about he's made comments on a lot of the players. I'm going to come back to that when we start talking about the book itself, because there are potentially one or two which may not have been quite the successes, shall we say, that some of the others were. And it'd be quite interesting to find out if they form part of the conversation as well. Just before we go into that, the sales pitch side of things and talk about the book itself, did George require any aid memoirs or anything, or was it just literally all there ready to spill out onto the page?
Well, I went through and I'd prepared a lot of questions and a lot of, I'd sort of done the whole chronology side of things. But I didn't want to get too bogged down with, we played this match, we played that match. It was very much more about what he was thinking, what he was feeling, what was going through his mind, why he made certain decisions. It was much more about those sorts of, that's the essence of the book. It's much more of an emotional sort of journey through what happened. It's not about, well, we played Middlesbrough on the Saturday and there was a big crowd and so and so scored with a left-footed goal. It's not about that. It's very much more about how people thought and felt about their time at Ipswich.
Brilliant. It's the story. It's the story of his time, isn't it?
Really? It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, let's have a chat about the book itself then. So, as we said, it's not just a words only book, and I've already stuck up a couple of photos that you kindly provided to us. One of yourself, which is fantastic. One of yourself with George going through the process of obtaining the information from him. And as you chat and let us know all about the book, etc., I will fire up some more of these photos. And there are some absolutely fantastic photos that I've seen so far within the book, and I'm sure it's something you're very keen to get across. So, why produce the book now? What are the reasons behind the timing of it?
I think it's just worked out well for me from a timing perspective personally. I mean, this is not my day job. I run a marketing agency in my day job. I've recently sort of renovated a house, got married last year, so it was
something else to do. Yeah,
there was a little bit of a gap, so I thought that why not write a 90,000 word book? So, but it's been brilliant. It's one of the best decisions, along with those first two things that I've ever made. So it's been a great experience.
I suppose there's a couple of anniversaries that the release of the book will link in with as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there are a couple of nice ones there. So in December, it'll be 30 years, unbelievably, since George came back to the club as manager. And I think it was a day short of the 31st anniversary of him making his debut as a 17-year-old against Manchester United.
Yeah, which he remembers as clear as a bell, doesn't he? Yeah, for one reason or another.
He certainly does, marking George best. Yeah.
Perfect.
And then obviously next year in May will be 25 years since we won at Wembley in the playoff final.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the silver anniversary, I think we'll call that, won't we? Rather than calling it 25 years, because all of a sudden all of us feel very old. At least we can call it after the
that's
anniversary.
Incredible, isn't it? Hard to believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're keen to point out earlier that it's the whole journey. It's not just the promotion and the 2 years in the Premier League, or Premiership as it may well have been called back in those days, but it's that full 8 years or so of George's managerial career. Premiership, Championship, selling players, playoff heartbreaks, selling players, rebuilding, etc., etc. It's the whole gamut.
It is, yeah. I mean, so we actually kicked the book off. One of the first things that's in there is David Sheepshanks' 5-year plan is stated in there, because I think when you look back at that was quite a groundbreaking thing to do at the time, and they actually managed to deliver on it, and it felt very ambitious, didn't it, when that was launched all those years ago. So we started off with that, and we've also, we've not just spoken to players who played at Wembley or were big stars in the Premier League. We've talked to people who were there when George came back as manager. So Mickey Stockwell and Simon Milton, Ian Marshall, really interesting article with Ian Marshall. And also it was interesting because not all of the players necessarily saw eye to eye with George when he first came in. And George has been absolutely brilliant at allowing people to put their side of the story across. And he hasn't asked for anything to be left out.
Oh, absolutely fascinating. Well, it sounds like it's going to be an absolutely fascinating read, as well as a fascinating view in terms of the photo. I was just going to pop this one of David Sheepshanks up again, as you were sort of referring to, and that's just a lovely photo there at the San Siro, isn't it? I presume he's looking up at the town fans there.
I think they're behind him, actually.
Oh, are they? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, in the bottom tier over there. I see it now. Yeah.
But I think, that he was, I mean, he said in the interview that he was a man on the mission. So that's where the headline comes from. But his interview was absolutely brilliant. I went and spent 3 hours with David, and there's 10 pages on that interview. And he was very honest, provided great insight on what went right and what went wrong, and his thoughts on George as well. So that's a really nice interview, that.
Blue Monday is proudly brought to you in partnership with our friends at Atwell Solicitors. your ideal legal partner for work on property or business law. Their client care has repeatedly been recognised as outstanding, and they are people-focused with a plain English approach which sets them apart. They have offices in Ipswich, Colchester and London, and to find out more, head to atwells.com.
Crikey, 10 pages of David Sheepshanks. He's another one who's not, not a bad talker, is he? Once he gets the juices flowing.
He's very articulate, and
yeah,
I thought it was, he was a critical part of that relationship between George and David was really important. It's been described by a lot of people as the most important relationship in the club. And I think we were very, very fortunate to have the pair of them.
Yeah, well, I suppose at the time it wasn't, I'm trying to think back, it wasn't an obvious decision to make in terms of appointing George. He'd had a very short player-manager career at Ayr, hadn't he? And hadn't been at Colchester that long before we came knocking. But I suppose it was the sort of planets aligned, if you like, in terms of we probably didn't have an awful lot of money to go out and get an experienced manager, if you like, and he'd sort of fallen on our doorstep, hadn't he?
Well, it was sort of funny how they both came together, really, because when George joined, David was on the board, but he wasn't the chairman. John Kerr was still the chairman, and John Kerr had family links with George, and they knew each other well. And I think it was George's understanding of Ipswich Town and his desire to play young players and to build the youth policy back up that was really fundamental to him getting that job. I think he showed such an understanding of the club that's how he got it, I think. And then, David became chairman, and they sort of, David describes it, they were thrust together, and they formed a great double act.
Yeah. Similarly aligned in terms of the way they wanted to run the club and the way they wanted the club to progress.
With no money, with absolutely no money.
Yeah,
it was about building really solid foundations, those community links. I think they were very much aligned in their thinking.
Yeah. Well, let's say you got the you got the 10-page interview with David Sheepshanks. As you say, you've already mentioned a couple of the players that you've spoken to, but you've spoken to a fair few players across the whole 8 years that George was with us. You got any particular highlights or any particular plus points from those particular conversations?
Loads. I think the thing I really like about it is that the interviews are also different.
Mm-hmm.
I think, when you're doing this and you start it off, you think, well, I don't want everybody just giving their view on what happened at Wembley on that lovely sunny day. What you're really trying to get at is that these players are from different backgrounds. They've got different stories. They're at different times in their career. So you've got someone like a Kieran Dyer, who was 16 or 15, 16 when George came in. And he was trying to, get a professional contract, and there was some, interesting exchanges with them at the beginning as well. But then, Kieran gives George a lot of credit for, being the manager, to have that faith in him and give him that chance. So it was a really important interview for Kieran, actually, because he felt that he'd been a little bit misrepresented in some of the things he'd said about George before. So it gave him an opportunity to put the record straight. He obviously had Richard Wright as well coming through as a young player and a local lad, and Richard's given a lovely interview. Same with James Scowcroft, and then you've got people like Maurizio Tirico. I mean, what a fan's favourite he was. We all loved him. Not least David Sheepshank, who was absolutely devastated when he had to sell him.
Sell him, yeah.
And Maurizio's story was really special because, when George came in, Maurizio had played that one game against Bolton on his debut in a 3-0 defeat. And then he'd been dropped, and he literally didn't play for a year. And George wasn't sure about him when he came in, but he worked really, really hard to prove himself thousands of miles away from home. So that was an amazing story from Maurizio. You've got people like Tony Mowbray, who had undergone, terrible issues in his personal life, who came to the club and had so much to prove to get his career back on track. Mark Venus was a 30-year-old who was a make weight in a deal which saw Steve Sedgley go to Wolves. Mark Venus was absolutely brilliant for Ipswich Town. What a player he was. I mean, he was, probably the classic example of George's expertise in the transfer market.
Yeah.
So they've all got their own stories. Yeah.
And hopefully, as I'm pinging up these photos, and apologies to those people who are listening rather than watching, but if you do get a chance to catch us on YouTube, then please do have a look. And hopefully, you'll just get a chance to see, as Neil was referring to, is just the layout of how the book sort of looks, and these photos that are form a major part of it. And I'll put some more up as we're chatting through. So just to get you an interest, as Neil says, it's not a black and white. This is November the 21st, 1998. We beat XYZ 2-0, and this was the attendance, and these were the goal scorers. It's very much a sort of pictorial story of George's time with us. Any other particular plays you say about Ian Marshall? As you rightly say, he's an interesting character. He's not one to beat around the bush when it comes to telling a story or two, is he either?
I had a great chat with Ian Marshall. I mean, he said how much he loved being at Ipswich Town. He told some great stories, some great tales. I'm not going to tell them because you'll need to read them in the book. But he have got an exclusive on a world exclusive on the famous shopping trolley incident. So please make sure you read the book for that one.
Well, there you go. That's sold it to everyone already.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the David Sheepshanks 10-pager. It's not just George's hours and hours of thoughts as well. You do cover some of the big matches that we did play over the course of George's time here as well.
Yeah, we've got a section, some action replay sections. So I didn't want the players to get too bogged down with individual matches. Mm-hmm. So we've picked out 9 of the biggest matches from the 8-year period. So to give them room, to give them lovely imagery, and to let the main central characters in those games talk about what it felt like for them.
I'll pop this one up here. This is, for example, an obvious one is the Inter Milan home game, which we've got here with the photo of Alan Armstrong heading in at the north stand end.
And how did he get that? How did he score that goal? Look at the angle he's at. It's incredible.
That's right. Yeah, in terms of a freeze frame.
It, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Still remember that. I still remember looking at the scoreboard and turning to my mate and saying, I'm not sure it's going to get much better than this. 1-0 at home to Inter Milan, and
it didn't. No.
It didn't, did it? No, sadly not. I know, but obviously from a stats perspective, there are still the stats there for those people who are interested in that side of things. You had a bit of help from one of our friends at the pod, I believe, putting those together.
Yeah, he was brilliant. The renegade stat man, Mr. Sean Salter. He has been absolutely fantastic. His database that he has. So a lot of people think that because I'm so, invested in Ipswich Town that I am a stato, but I'm not. I don't keep a spreadsheet or a record of matches or anything like that. It's all from memory with me. It's all things it's just how I recall things. But Sean's done a lovely job with the stats, and I think he's really pleased with how we've laid them out and brought them to life. Yeah,
I was going to say exactly that. Just having a screenshot here of the promotion season and the first year in the Premiership, that you can sort of see it from the layout. It's quite a nice, nicely laid out display as well there.
Yeah, Sean. He even Craig. He even provided the league position after every game.
Stat for you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just players and chairman, managers you spoke to. It's also other people from within the club, media people at the time as well that you've managed to grab some time with.
Yeah, it was important to do that. I don't really like the phrase. It sounds a bit managerial speak, but a sort of a 360-degree view of the club at that time. So Terry Hunt, who was the editor of the East Anglian Daily Times, he's given a nice interview. Terry Baxter, who was the Radio Suffolk commentator at the time, Phil Ham, Austin Dack, who was at the Evening Star, who was a sales and promotions manager, who spent a lot of time with the Tractor Boy character, taking him around. All of this stuff happened at that time. It was amazing. Like Singing the Blues happened that came to our world when George was manager. Marcus Stewart's gloves, all these little things. There was so many of those sort of incidents. Then within the club, Paul Clouting, who was the commercial director, Mike Brooks, who ran the retail side of the business, and Mike Noy, my friend, who looked after the programs and things like that. So lots of different people. And one of the last people that I spoke to in the process of doing the interviews was Pat Godbold as well. Of course.
So as hopefully people can see, it's not just a player and manager and footballer's perspective of what happened. It's all areas of the club are covered, internally and indeed externally. Just before we go on to the logistics of when it's out and bits and pieces like that. You said earlier that George talked about all of the players. Does he talk about all of the players? I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, a Nigerian winger and potentially an Italian goalkeeper that joined us early thousands.
Yeah, he does talk about both of those people, and as do the other players.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, George talks about them. They talk about George. So, like I say, it's a two-way street. But George does talk about those characters. David Sheepshanks talks about them as well.
Oh, fantastic! Well, I say it sounds like it's going to be an absolutely fascinating read. I'm just going to pop up another couple of screenshots just for people who are watching, just so they can get a flavour of the book and its layout. And as you can see, there's it really does look like it's going to be a fantastic looking book. So in terms of, as I say, the logistics, what sort of timescales are we looking at the moment, Neil? When are we going to be seeing this book drop onto our doorsteps?
Well, at the moment, we're just going through the book's completely written. We're just going through making the final amendments, and it will go off to print at the end of September. Okay. So it will take about 6 weeks to print. So mid-November, the book should start to hit the shops, and those people who have pre-ordered should start to receive them through their letterboxes. I'll try and get them to people who pre-ordered before they go into the shops, because I think that's right. I think, the people who have pre-ordered, I thank them sincerely for doing that, because it is a commitment, and I'm aware that it's not a cheap product, but it's a lot of energy's gone into it, and a lot of the decisions I've made around the production techniques and the quality have all been about creating a really, really high quality book.
And as you sort of allude to there are 2 editions available. I'll pop them both up here. This is the collector's edition I've got up here. Is that right, on the screen at the moment?
That's right, Craig. Yes. So the collector's edition comes with the sleeve, which is a cloth-bound sleeve, which is then foiled. It will also have a bookmark and a certificate, which will be individually numbered and hand signed by George. And the individual numbering will be there's 913 copies of that limited edition version, because George played or managed a total of 913 matches, which is a record for Ipswich Town.
Wonderful stuff. I'll just pop up the standard edition there so people can get a look at the front cover as it will look.
The book is essentially the same. I think it's important to say that. I'm not trying to fox anybody. The book is essentially the same, but you've just got this extra sort of layer of packaging, and in terms of the certificate and the hand signature from George, and the bookmarking. It's just those little touches just to make it that a little bit more collectible. But the sleeve is a lovely piece. It will look really nice.
And where's the best place or places that people can order a copy? I realised literally an hour or two before we had a chat that there were a news item from TWTD popped into my inbox to say that we can order via Phil at TWTD. Are any other places that we can look for?
Yeah. So the Phil is now selling them on TWTD, as you just said. We've got a website for the book where you can find out more information about it, which is www.georgeburleybook.com. So nice and simple, and you can pre-order a copy on that website as well.
Perfect, and we'll put a link into the podcast blurb and the YouTube summary as well, so people can click straight through to that.
You can find us on Twitter as well, or X as it's now known, and I will be tweeting updates on the production schedule, just keeping people informed on there.
Perfect. And there's also a charitable donation from each sale, you were saying before we joined as well, which is quite apt as well.
Yeah, well remembered. Yes, I thought it was really important. Marcus Stewart was a big part of that success under George. Achieved some amazing things, and such a great lad as well. And we wanted to show our support for Marcus with a donation from each book sold going to the Derby Rimmer Foundation, which Marcus is supporting, and also Cancer Support Suffolk as well. So two really worthy causes. It's just a gesture to show that we're thinking of those charities.
Perfect. Yeah, lovely touch. So so if people want to get some more details, then it's George Burley book, and I say we'll put some links on the podcast chat and also on the YouTube as well. So that's All to Play For is the name of the book if people want to Google that. And it's, as you say, you can start pre-ordering now. Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah, please do. It makes a massive difference to us producing the book to get those pre-orders in. It really is a show of commitment that myself and George would really appreciate.
Wonderful stuff. Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Neil. So I hope it's a roaring success. I'm pretty sure you've got at least 7 guaranteed sales from each of the members of the podcast team. You never know. We'll do a secret Santa and all get a very similarly sized present in our stockings from each of us, maybe. Well, I say thank you very, very much for your time. I say I hope it's a rip-roaring success. And I say if people want to pre-order now, we'll stick a link so people can easily click through.
Thanks very much, Craig. Cheers.